Most people think Roman soldiers were unstoppable because of their armor, their training, and their discipline. They picture the iron breastplates, the short swords, the perfectly formed battle lines, and they assume that's what built the greatest fighting force the ancient world had ever seen. But the truth is something Roman generals understood with absolute clarity, and modern historians have spent centuries quietly confirming. The Roman Empire was not built on iron or strategy. It was built in a kitchen, a specific, brutally simple kitchen that traveled with every legion across every road and every battlefield, from Britain to Egypt to the deserts of Persia. And the foods that came out of that kitchen turned ordinary men into soldiers who could march 25 miles a day in full armor, carrying 60 pounds of gear on their backs, in heat that would put a modern athlete on the ground. They did this 6 days a week for years at a time, on a diet that contained no protein shakes, no electrolyte powders, no performance gels, and no modern supplements of any kind. What they had instead was 9 specific foods that modern nutritional science has now studied in detail and found to be almost shockingly well designed for the exact physical demands those soldiers faced. Hit that subscribe button right now, because every week on this channel, I pull back the curtain on the forgotten food wisdom that built the strongest civilizations in human history, and the science that finally explains why it worked. Stick around, because number 4 on this list is something Roman soldiers ate every single day that modern doctors are now studying as a potential answer to chronic inflammation. And number 1 is not what almost anyone expects. It is not meat, it is not wine, it is not anything exotic, it is the single peasant food that made up nearly 70% of every Roman soldier's calories, and it is the real reason those legions could march 25 miles a day in full armor. 9 foods, 400 years of Roman dominance. Let's get into it. Number 9. Pasca, the soldier's drink that doubled as medicine. Before we talk about anything a Roman legionary ate, we have to talk about what he drank. And the answer is something that would horrify most modern people. Pasca, a mixture of sour wine vinegar, water, and sometimes a small amount of crushed herbs or honey. It was issued daily to every soldier in the Roman army, and it was considered so essential that running out of Pasca was treated as a logistical crisis on par with running out of food. Most people miss this, but Pasca was not chosen because the Romans were poor or because clean water was unavailable. It was chosen deliberately because Roman generals had figured out something through generations of observation. Soldiers who drank Pasca got sick less often, recovered faster, and could march longer in hot weather than soldiers who drank plain water. And modern science has finally caught up to what those generals already knew. The acetic acid in vinegar has been studied extensively in recent decades and has been shown to have measurable antibacterial properties, strong enough to kill many of the pathogens that cause dysentery, food poisoning, and the kind of waterborne illnesses that historically killed more soldiers than enemy weapons ever did. Here's what makes this remarkable. Pasca was, in effect, the world's first sports drink and the world's first water purification system rolled into a single canteen. The vinegar helped preserve the water from microbial growth during long marches in heat. The small amount of acid helped soldiers absorb minerals more efficiently, and the slight kick of the drink was psychologically activating in a way plain water was not. Modern research on vinegar has also linked it to improved blood sugar stability after meals, meaning a soldier sipping Pasca with his ration of bread was getting a more sustained energy release than a soldier drinking plain water with the same meal. Roman generals did not have access to laboratory studies. They had centuries of pattern recognition, and what they recognized was that the men who drank Pasca finished campaigns alive while the men who didn't sometimes didn't make it home at all. Number 8. Olives and olive oil, the daily fat ration that fueled 25-mile marches. The Roman soldier's ration included a daily allotment of olives and olive oil, and the quantity was significant. We are not talking about a drizzle on a salad. We are talking about somewhere between 2 and 3 ounces of olive oil per soldier per day, in addition to a handful of whole olives. That sounds like a lot of fat by modern standards, and that is exactly the point. A soldier marching 25 miles in full armor burns through calories at a rate that would be difficult to replace with carbohydrates alone. Olive oil delivers roughly 240 calories per ounce in a form the body can use almost immediately for sustained energy. And here's the practical magic that Roman generals understood without needing to call it by its modern name. Olive oil is rich in monounsaturated fats, which have been studied extensively in modern cardiovascular research and shown to support heart function, reduce inflammation, and provide steady, slow-burning fuel that does not spike or crash blood sugar the way refined carbohydrates do. But the benefits go much further than calories. Olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal, which modern research has identified as one of the most powerful natural anti-inflammatory compounds in the human diet. Some studies have found that the anti-inflammatory effects of a few tablespoons of high-quality olive oil are measurably comparable to a small dose of ibuprofen. Most people walk right past this, but think about what that meant for a Roman soldier. Marching 25 miles a day in armor produces enormous accumulating inflammation in muscles, joints, and connective tissue. A soldier consuming olive oil every single day was, in effect, taking a daily natural anti-inflammatory that helped his body recover between marches. Whole olives delivered something else just as important: sodium in a naturally cured, bioavailable form. Soldiers losing salt through hours of sweat in the heat needed a constant replacement, and a handful of olives delivered that replacement in a stable, portable, shelf-stable package. The Roman ration was not designed by accident. It was designed by men who had watched generations of soldiers either thrive or fail in the field, and who had identified, by trial and error, the exact foods that kept legions on their feet. Number 7. Garlic. The soldier's medicine hidden in every meal. Garlic was so fundamental to the Roman soldier's diet that ancient writers commented on it constantly, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with complaint about the smell of an entire encampment of garlic-eating men. The Roman general Pliny the Elder wrote about garlic as a medicinal food, and Roman military physicians used it routinely to treat wound infections, intestinal complaints, and respiratory illness in the field. Soldiers ate it raw, crushed it into their bread, mixed it into stews, and chewed it whole before battle in the belief that it gave them courage and physical strength. And here's what's remarkable. Modern science has confirmed that those soldiers were not wrong. Garlic contains a sulfur compound called allicin, which is released when raw garlic is crushed or chewed. Allicin has been studied extensively in modern microbiology and has been shown to have measurable antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties, strong enough that some clinical research has examined it as a complement to conventional antibiotic treatment. For a Roman soldier in the field, where small wounds could become deadly infections, and contaminated food could destroy an entire cohort within days, daily garlic consumption was not folk superstition. It was a functional defense system built into every meal. And this is where it gets really remarkable. Modern cardiovascular research has also linked regular garlic consumption to improved circulation, lower blood pressure, and better blood vessel function, all of which would have direct, measurable benefits for a soldier whose job required sustained physical exertion in extreme conditions. Here's the practical magic of garlic that modern kitchens forget. The allicin compound is most potent when garlic is crushed and consumed raw within a few minutes of being broken down. Cooking degrades it. Sitting in oil for hours degrades it. The Roman soldier crushing garlic into his bread at the start of a march was getting the full pharmacological benefit in a way most modern people who buy pre-minced garlic in jars are not. They were not seasoning, they were medicating. Number 6. Lentils. The protein backbone of the legion. While modern audiences associate Roman military strength with meat, the reality of the legionary diet was that meat was relatively rare, eaten occasionally during festivals or after successful campaigns, but not the daily protein source. The daily protein source for the Roman army was lentils. Lentils are one of the oldest cultivated foods in human history, with evidence of their use stretching back more than 9,000 years across the Mediterranean and Middle East. By the time the Roman legions were marching across the empire, lentils had been a foundational food in that region for thousands of years. And Roman quartermasters relied on them because of 3 specific qualities that made them ideal military rations. They were dense in protein, They stored for years without spoiling, and they could be cooked into a thick, filling stew from nothing more than water, salt, and whatever herbs were available. Most people walk right past this, but a single cup of cooked lentils delivers around 18 grams of protein, plus iron, folate, fiber, and the kind of slow-releasing carbohydrates that fuel sustained physical activity for hours. And here's what makes this remarkable. The combination of protein and iron in lentils was specifically suited to the demands of military marching. Iron is what allows the blood to carry oxygen to working muscles, and a deficiency in it produces exactly the kind of fatigue and weakness that would have rendered a soldier useless in the field. Protein is what allows muscle tissue to repair and rebuild between marches. Lentils delivered both in a single, shelf-stable, portable food that could feed an entire legion for months. And this is where it gets really interesting. Roman military cooks understood through generations of trial and error that lentils were best when paired with certain other foods. They were almost always served with bread, vinegar, and a small amount of fat. Combinations that modern nutritional science now recognizes as dramatically improving the bioavailability of the nutrients in the legumes. The Romans were running, without knowing the words for it, what modern dietitians would call protein complementation. They were 2,000 years ahead of the science. Before we move on to the heavier hitters, let me ask you something. Are you starting to see what the Roman military actually was? It was not a fighting force first. It was a logistics machine. And the logistics machine was built around a kitchen that had been refined over centuries to extract the maximum possible physical performance out of a human body in the harshest possible conditions. That is the philosophy this channel is built on. The idea that the strongest civilizations in human history figured out things about the human body that modern science is only now catching up to. If that resonates with you, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach other people who are tired of being told that ancient cultures were primitive when the historical record so clearly suggests the opposite. And if you're not subscribed to Forgotten Herbal yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We post every week, and every video is built to pull this forgotten knowledge back into modern hands where it belongs. Alright, let's keep going. Number 5. Onions. The raw food eaten by the handful. Roman soldiers ate onions in quantities that would shock modern eaters. Raw onions, chopped into bread, layered into stews, eaten whole alongside cheese and olives. They were considered so essential that Roman military gardens, yes, the legions actually planted gardens at long-term encampments, almost always included onion beds as a priority crop. And the reason was practical, not cultural. Onions, like garlic, contain sulfur compounds that have been studied in modern research and shown to have antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and cardiovascular benefits. They are also extraordinarily rich in vitamin C, which Roman generals did not know by name but had observed through generations of campaigns was somehow protective against the kind of slow-wasting illness that would later be identified as scurvy. Here's what most people get wrong about onions. They cook them. They caramelize them. They soften them. And in doing so, they destroy a significant portion of the very compounds that make onions valuable. The Roman soldier eating raw onions with his bread was extracting the full benefit of the quercetin, the sulfur compounds, and the vitamin C in a way that modern cooking methods often fail to preserve. Quercetin specifically is a flavonoid that modern research has linked to improved exercise performance, reduced exercise-induced inflammation, and enhanced immune function during periods of physical stress. For a soldier whose entire life was a period of physical stress, daily raw onion consumption was a functional performance enhancer that no modern athletic program would dream of recommending in the same quantities. Here's the practical magic of onions in the Roman ration. They were cheap, they grew almost anywhere, they stored for months, and they delivered medicinal-grade compounds in every single bite. The Roman army did not feed onions to its soldiers because onions were available. It fed onions to its soldiers because Roman generals had figured out, through centuries of observation, that men who ate them daily outperformed men who did not. Number 4. Hardtack. The biscuit that fueled the empire. The butylatum was a twice-baked wheat biscuit so hard that Roman soldiers sometimes had to soak it in water, wine, or pasca before they could even bite into it. It was the field ration of the Roman legions, the food that traveled in every soldier's pack across every march, and it was specifically designed to be nearly indestructible. Hardtack would keep for months, sometimes years, without spoiling, even in the heat of North Africa or the damp of Britain. And modern food scientists studying ancient Roman bread have confirmed that the recipe was almost perfectly engineered for long-term preservation. The butylatum was made from whole wheat flour, water, salt, and sometimes a small amount of oil, baked, allowed to cool, and then baked again. A process that drove out almost all moisture and made the biscuit resistant to mold, bacterial growth, and decay. Most people miss this, but the genius of hardtack was not just preservation, it was nutritional density. A single pound of butylatum delivered roughly 1,500 calories, almost all of them from complex carbohydrates that the body could break down slowly over hours of physical exertion. This was, in effect, the world's first energy bar, and it predated the modern energy bar by 2,000 years. Here's what makes this remarkable. The wheat used in Roman hardtack was not the modern, highly processed white wheat that dominates today's grocery shelves. It was emmer wheat, an ancient grain with a significantly higher protein content, more fiber, and more micronutrients than modern wheat varieties. Roman soldiers eating butylatum daily were getting a slow-burning, high-fiber, mineral-rich fuel source that modern athletes would pay premium prices to replicate. And modern researchers studying ancient grains have begun to study emmer and other ancestral wheats for potential benefits in blood sugar regulation, gut health, and chronic inflammation. The Roman field ration was not crude. It was the result of centuries of refinement, and the modern world is only now beginning to understand what made it work. Number 3. Salt pork. The preserved fat that kept soldiers alive in winter. The Roman legions did not eat fresh meat regularly, but they did eat preserved meat constantly. And the most important form was lardum, a salt-cured pork product that delivered concentrated calories, fat, and protein in a stable, portable package. Salt pork was issued in small daily rations and could be eaten raw in a pinch, or more commonly sliced thin and added to stews, lentil dishes, or porridge to enrich the basic ration. Roman quartermasters understood something modern grocery store culture has forgotten. Fat is not the enemy of physical performance. Fat, in the right form, is one of the most efficient fuels the human body can use. A soldier marching with 60 pounds of gear in cold weather burned through fat reserves at an enormous rate, and the daily salt pork ration was specifically designed to keep those reserves topped up. Here's the practical magic of cured fat that modern science is finally beginning to take seriously. Animal fat from properly raised animals contains specific fatty acid profiles, including stearic acid and palmitoleic acid, that have been shown in recent research to support hormone production, brain function, and sustained energy in ways that highly refined modern fats simply do not. Most people walk right past this, but the salt curing process itself was doing something significant. Salt-cured meat preserved not only the meat itself, but also some of the fat-soluble vitamins it contained. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, in a form the body could absorb efficiently. A Roman soldier in northern Europe in winter with limited access to sunlight and fresh vegetables was getting critical vitamin D and vitamin A from his daily portion of lardum at a moment when modern populations in the same latitudes routinely become deficient in both. And this is where it gets really remarkable. The combination of salt pork with lentils, onions, and hardtack created exactly the kind of complete nutritional profile that modern military rations spend millions of dollars trying to replicate. The Romans did it with 4 foods, a fire, and a pot. Number 2. Cheese. The dense, aged fuel that traveled the empire. Roman soldiers carried cheese, caseus, as part of their standard ration, and the cheese they carried was not the soft, fresh, refrigerator-dependent product of modern grocery stores. It was hard, aged, intensely concentrated cheese, often made from sheep or goat milk, and it was designed specifically to survive long campaigns in any climate. A small block of Roman aged cheese could last for weeks in a soldier's pack and could be shaved or crumbled into almost any meal to add fat, protein, calcium, and concentrated flavor. Most people miss this, but aged cheese is one of the most nutrient-dense foods ever invented. The aging process concentrates the protein and fat of the original milk into a much smaller volume, while also developing beneficial bacterial cultures that support gut health and immune function in ways modern nutritional science is only beginning to understand. A few ounces of aged cheese delivered nearly 200 calories, 20 grams of protein, a generous dose of calcium and vitamin K2, and the kind of fermented compounds that modern probiotic research is now actively studying. And here's what makes this remarkable. Vitamin K2 specifically, which is concentrated in aged cheeses and other traditionally fermented foods, has been linked in modern research to bone strength, cardiovascular health, and the proper utilization of calcium in the body. For a soldier whose skeletal system was under constant load, carrying gear, marching on stone roads, sleeping on hard ground, daily vitamin K2 intake was, without anyone knowing the word for it, functional skeletal support. Here's the practical magic of cheese in the Roman ration. It was shelf-stable, it was light, it was concentrated, and it could be combined with literally any other food in the ration to instantly improve its nutritional profile. A piece of hardtack with cheese became a meal. Lentils with crumbled cheese became a complete protein source. Bread with cheese and an onion became, by any modern definition, a well-balanced meal. The Roman army did not invent cheese, but it perfected the use of cheese as military fuel. Number 1. Poles. The peasant porridge that built the Roman Empire. Here is what almost no one expects. The single food that made up nearly 70% of every Roman soldier's caloric intake, the food that did the heaviest lifting in keeping legions on the road, day after day, year after year, was not meat. It was not wine. It was not anything glamorous, it was poles. A thick, simple porridge made from boiled grain, usually emmer wheat or barley, sometimes mixed with salt, olive oil, lentils, cheese, or whatever else was on hand. Pulse was so foundational to Roman life that Roman writers referred to their own people as pultifagi, porridge eaters, long before bread became a staple. And the Roman army carried poles forward into every campaign, because Roman generals knew what modern endurance athletes are only now relearning. The single most efficient way to fuel sustained, multi-hour physical exertion is through complex carbohydrates eaten consistently throughout the day. Modern people walk right past this constantly. They assume that protein is the king of athletic performance, but for an athlete whose job is hours of continuous movement, not short bursts of explosive strength, but sustained, repetitive, hours-long effort, carbohydrates are the dominant fuel source. A Roman soldier marching 25 miles a day was burning roughly 5,000 calories. Poles delivered those calories in a form that the body could break down steadily over hours, releasing glucose into the bloodstream at a sustainable rate and refilling the muscle glycogen reserves that powered the next day's march. Here's what makes this remarkable. Multiple ancient cultures arrived at the same conclusion independently. The Spartans had their own version. The Greeks had theirs. The Persians had theirs. Every great ancient military force was, at its core, a porridge-eating culture, and modern sports nutrition research has now confirmed why. Complex carbohydrates from minimally processed whole grains are, gram for gram, one of the most efficient fuels the human body can use for endurance performance. And the form mattered. Poles was not bread. It was not pasta. It was a hot, water-cooked porridge that delivered its calories in the most easily digestible form possible, meaning a soldier could eat a large meal of it and be ready to march within an hour, rather than waiting hours for heavier foods to digest. The Roman Empire was not built on iron, it was built on a bowl of porridge. And the modern world, with all of its protein powders and performance gels and engineered sports nutrition, is slowly, quietly finding its way back to exactly what those Roman generals figured out 2,000 years ago. 9 foods, 25 miles a day in full armor, one thread connecting all of them. None of these foods were complicated. None of them were expensive. None of them were new even by Roman standards. They were the same foods that had been feeding Mediterranean cultures for thousands of years before the legions ever marched, refined by centuries of trial and error into a logistics system so effective that it carried the empire across continents. Pasca for hydration and disease prevention. Olives and olive oil for sustained fuel and natural anti-inflammation. Garlic for daily medicine. Lentils for protein and iron. Raw onions for performance compounds. Hardtack for portable carbohydrates. Salt pork for concentrated calories and fat-soluble vitamins. Aged cheese for protein, calcium, and gut health. And the foundation underneath it all? A humble bowl of porridge that quietly powered the greatest military force the ancient world ever produced. The modern supplement industry will always push you toward a bottle. A protein powder, a pre-workout, a recovery drink, an electrolyte mix, a performance gel. Because bottles are profitable and porridge is not. The men who marched 25 miles a day in iron armor across 3 continents did not have any of that. What they had was a kitchen, a wagon, and a system of foods refined by generations of soldiers who had either thrived or died based on what came out of that kitchen. They were not primitive. They were the result of centuries of relentless practical observation. Of course, one important note. The foods that did this work, real cured olives, properly aged cheese, traditionally fermented vinegar, freshly crushed garlic, whole emmer wheat, bear almost no resemblance to the mass-produced, chemically refined versions sold in modern stores. The compounds that made these foods powerful are concentrated in the real ingredients, not in the cheap industrial imitations that have replaced them on most shelves. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me which one surprised you the most. Are you Team Pasca for the daily medicine in a canteen? Team Garlic for the soldier's pharmacy in every meal? Or Team Pulse for the porridge that quietly built an empire? I read every comment. And if you got something out of this video, hit the like button and subscribe to Forgotten Herbal, where ancient wisdom meets modern clarity, one forgotten food at a time. See you on the next one.